Oh, it's not doing its slideshow thing.
Okay, it's fine. It is what it is.
I don't think it matters. It helps me anyway.
It did before. It's interesting. Why don't you just expand it and see if
No, that's okay. I can leave it this way for now.
okay, it's good.
Oh, okay. So, this talk is about King Arthur. And this part over here shows you the name of the guy on the horse, and that is Rex Arturus. And since it really doesn't look British, I will explain that this is a mosaic, and the mosaic is in the town of Otranto, which is in Italy. And what is King Arthur doing in the town of Otranto in Italy? Well, it turns out that Dante, you know that Dante? He was very fond of Arthurian stories. And just before Paolo and Francesca get slaughtered for their adultery, they are reading the story of Lancelot and Guinevere. So Dante decided to reward King Arthur by memorializing him in his book. Unfortunately, he's in the lustful circle of hell. Okay. Now, in this talk, I'm going to talk about who was Arthur, if he was at all. Was he a king? Was he a warlord? Was he an ehumerized Celtic deity? What was his world like? Where did he live? Hold court, fight battles. And by the way, I'm a little hoarse today. No comments, please. But if you have questions, please ask them. That'll help me hold out to the end of this talk. Before we start, I'd like to ask those who are unmuted how familiar you are with the matter of Britain as the legends and histories of the earliest British people, particularly those of the Arthur story, is called. Has anybody here read the Mabinogion, the Lays of Marie de France, that is the stories she wrote, those of Chrétien de Troyes, Eschenbach's Parsifal, Nennius, Geoffrey of Monmouth, Mallory? How many have seen Camelot or another Broadway play or a film? Let me know where you're at. Any questions? Any comments? Well, with that, I'll go on.
Well, please post your comments on the chat. Have anybody seen Camelot? Have a, and the books and works that were mentioned by Jane? Okay. What does a humorize mean? And I can't find it.
I just found that out about a month ago. It really means that once there was a Celtic god, but when Christianity came in, they didn't really want to worship Celtic god, but they hate giving up the stories. So all the myths of the god became the stories of the hero.
So that it probably resembles a little bit of Gilgamesh at some point.
Okay, now, this particular thing, first, here, for anybody who hasn't been through any of that I just listed, here's my 1-minute retelling of the story. Arthur was fathered on Igraine at Tetanuja Castle by Uther Pendragon, with the help of the magician Merlin, who had transformed him into a likeness of her husband, who had been out fighting Uther and in fact was dead. However, she didn't know that. She thought, oh, here is my husband safe and sound from the battlefield, and she welcomed him appropriately, and that's how Arthur was conceived. As appropriate with noble families, when Arthur was born, he was fostered out to the family of Kay. And he became Kay's squire. And when Arthur was in his early tweens, Uther died. By the way, he had married Igraine by this time, and a sword appeared in a rock in the marketplace with a post-it or something saying whoever could pull it out would be the king. Everybody but Arthur, who never tried because he had no idea of his heritage, and anyway, he was just a kid. And everybody failed, but having been sent back home from a tournament to fetch Kay's sword, which he was responsible for bringing, he grabbed the one in the rock to save himself some steps. And he heard a big noise behind him. And he thought, oh my gosh, there's been a disaster. And he turned around and everybody was on their knees. And he thought, oh no, the world is coming to an end, and they're praying. But then they were actually proclaiming him as king. Okay, he grew to be a great king. He fought 12 battles. He was always successful. He gathered a group of knights around him, and he had a big round table that seated 100 of them, and sent them on quests to aid the populace, most often posed by damsels who would show up on Pentecost or other holidays and ask for help. The most famous quest of all was that for the Holy Grail, and we'll get to that. He fought the Saxons and maybe also the Roman emperor. We'll get to that too. Unfortunately, Arthur had fathered a son, Mordred, at the town of Caerleon with the help of his half-sister Morgause. And some years later, when Arthur and his knights were far from Rome, either because Arthur was fighting Lancelot, who had kidnapped Guinevere and fled with her, or for some other reason, and we'll get to that, Mordred usurped the throne. Some versions say he usurped Guinevere too. Okay, Arthur came back, confronted him at the Battle of Camlan, in which both Mordred and Arthur was killed. As for other actors in the Arthur story, Gawain, or Gwalchmai, the son of King Lot in the Orkney Islands, and Morgause, now his queen, a step up after she got kicked out for out-of-wedlock pregnancy concerns. Gawain was therefore half-brother to Mordred. He has his own epic, Gawain and the Green Knight, which you may have read. Tristan is more peripheral to the Arthur story, but his love for the Irish Isolde, or that's the German, sorry, Isolde, the wife of Mark, King of Cornwall, has been a basis for poetry, legends, novels, and even an opera. The stories of those two date from the Arthurian legend-led times, or maybe before. Lancelot du Lac was a centuries later addition, and he was supposed to have come from Brittany, then called Armorica. Moving to the literature, here is an early tale of Arthur, this one associated with the carving from a village in Gloucestershire. I call them stories, by the way, to weasel out of calling them histories, legends, or myths. In this story, he has ridden Red Hare, his horse, to rid the village of a giant who has taken over the only spring in the village, demanding sacrifices, virgins and so forth, in return for water, those he would eat. The villagers gave Arthur what hospitality they could, and early the next morning they took him to the spring, which issued from deep within a cave. Beside the cave, a hunting horn hung in a tree. Arthur blew a blast, and the giant rode out to answer. The villagers retreated except for one small boy who hid behind a bush to watch. Arthur challenges, and the giant mounts his horse. They fight many bouts without result. Arthur's strength is ebbing, but as the sun rises, the giant's strength increases. Arthur's famed lance, Rongomion, breaks on the giant's armor, and the fighters dismount, now brandishing their swords. At high noon, the giant knocks Excalibur from Arthur's hand, and Arthur falls. Behind the bush, the little boy was praying to our gracious lady, whose image Arthur always carried into battle on his shoulders. As the giant raised his sword to end the fight, a little cloud grew large and blocked the sun. The boy ran to Arthur and put Excalibur into his hand. With his new strength, Arthur drove his sword into the giant's eye. The eye fell out and the giant's face, and his brains came out behind it. Well, I certainly hope you enjoyed that story because I had fun making it up.
Jane, quick question to you, I guess. Where does the story of Arthur coming in? Is this Anglo-Saxon? Is this Roman? Or are you coming to that? I don't. Also,
I am
go ahead.
coming to that.
Okay, good.
Okay, the boy ran to him. Okay, I hope you like the story, right? All right, I wanted to illustrate the process of myth making. The carving is real. It's actually of the Roman war god Mars, and it's actually at Gloucestershire. He's wearing Roman armor of some time between Caesar's invasion of Britain, which was in 50 BCE, to their exit in the last decade of the 4th century, 388 to 400, if you want to be precise. I used bits and pieces of written sources about Arthur, like the image of Our Lady he wore on his shoulders, but only at the Battle of Baden Hill. Sir Gawain is sometimes conflated with Gwalchmai, the Welsh solar deity, whose strength increased and waned with the sun. This might be an example of eumerization. Yet in the stories, Celtic Arthur became a somewhat Roman and a Christian. How did that happen? There are lots of Roman relics in Britain. By the 10th to 12th centuries, when most of the Arthur stories were either written or written down, Latin was long gone as a spoken language, except at Mass, and could be read or written only in monasteries. The many villas of affluent Roman administrators and those who had gotten rich through trade were abandoned. Those Roman legionnaires who'd been pensioned off and given farmland, which was the rule, and active soldiers, maybe with loved ones among the British population, may have remained rather than face an uncertain future in their homeland. And these were quickly assimilated. The first Christian martyrs met their deaths in Wales in 304. Christianity became legal in Rome in 313 with the Edict of Milan and became the state religion in 323. Anti-pagan legislation had followed after Constantine died in 337, but the legionnaires in Britain, well, they were far from home and they had enough troubles with the Picts and the Scots and the Saxons without stirring up the locals, who after all were their source of food. Saint David is credited with converting the Welsh, and he was 6th century. So although Christianity was undoubtedly present before that time, paganism was alive and well. Even new pagan temples were erected. And by the way, I mean Celtic paganism, not Roman. Okay, after the Romans left, the carvings, the camps, the baths, the barracks, the hill forts, which may have been part Celtic and maybe part Roman, they were no longer readable. The common people didn't know Latin, and so stories like mine were made up to explain them. Hill forts come in a few varieties. Some were fortified places only, some had some rudimentary dwellings, and some had a castle. This is Dinas Emrys. Now, Emrys is the Welsh name of Ambrosius. And Aurelius Ambrosius, which is, right, a Latin name. Do I have a question? Okay. Ambrosius was Uther's brother. And actually, Ambrosius and Gernow had a legitimate sister for Arthur, whose name was Anna, which is obviously more Roman than Welsh. Now, it's strange to think that a brother would have two different kinds of names. It's possible that they had two different mothers or even two different fathers, because polyandry and polygamy were both present among the Celts. But on the other hand, the father of both of them is considered to be Custennin, which is, of course, a way of saying Constantine. So maybe the brotherhood was sworn rather than birth brotherhood. Okay. So this is in the Northwest Wales, and it had the remnants of a castle somewhere. This is a kind of fanciful reconstruction of what it might have looked like in the day. This camp, which is obviously much more extensive, is obviously Roman. Now, the barracks are over here, and the core, it looks like a theater over here. And maybe that's where the troops were assembled to get orders and things like that. Somewhere or other, there must have been baths. There were always baths, probably around over here. And this particular one is about 2 miles south of Hadrian's Wall. Now, Hadrian's Wall, which had camps all along it, but not always so big, was a wonderful deterrent to invasions until the invaders developed boats, of course. The Celts came to the islands centuries before the Romans, and the Britons had been inhabitants from Neolithic times. The Celts arrived around 1000 BCE. As invaders or peaceful colonizers, we have no idea. Nobody really knows. There were 4 different tribes of them in Wales alone. They spoke a Celtic language that differentiated into 2 main branches, Brythonic, which was spoken in Wales and Cornwall, and maybe up in the Orkneys, where Pictish was kind of extinct, and also in Armorica, which was on the continent, and Goidelic in Ireland and Scotland. Gradually, Brythonic differentiated into Welsh, Cornish, and possibly the now extinct Pictish. Where is my map? Oh, it's right here. And this is the linguistic map.
Jane, I have a question.
Sure.
So Celts originally came from Anatolia. Would that be considered correct fact? And obviously went through sacking Rome. And then is there any historical effect of them ending up on the British Isles and, and therefore obviously settling? And what about Britons, right? I mean, you have some area of, Britain area currently in France. And then you have obviously Welsh speaking, Celtic language at the moment. Am I getting it mixed up? And Greg, do you have anything to add? Greg, you have anything to add to this?
I don't think they came from Anatolia. They invaded Anatolia.
They invaded Anatolia. Where did they come from?
Well, I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Go ahead. There's Latin period, which is about 500 BCE. It's in Gallia, modern France, and part of the Germany. That's where the culture developed. But the linguistic input came. It's a part of I think it's Indo-European languages. So
yes.
It's most likely was contributed from the movements from, according to the Kurgan theory, from that area between Caspian and Black Sea, from where most of the Indo-European tribes came. And obviously they mixed with the local population. There might have been some, I mean, we know that the agriculture came from Anatolia, so there were earlier movements from Anatolia, probably around maybe 4,000 or 5,000 BC, you know, but then this movement of the Indo-European tribes probably was between like 2,000 and 3,000 BC. So that's like mixture of everything. So, but the culture formed in that area where what we know as Gallia, kind of like briefly, and then they also moved into Britain across the strait. Jane, if you want to add something or change, I don't know. Do you agree with everything?
It sounds pretty good. Some of my sources, which might even be questionable, put the original origin about Central Asia. So, and there were even pointers that it might have come from even further east. But I think yours is the most generally accepted version.
What's the date in your map there?
I'm sorry?
What's roughly when does your map apply? I'm guessing that whole white area is Saxon.
Yeah, that would have been Saxon. Well, actually, I think Hadrian's Wall is a little further down, but it's only 84 miles across. Yes, that would have been, well, it's not just Saxons. It was Saxons, it was Angles, it was Picts, it was, you know, anybody with a boat, basically.
Also Utes, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, Utes. Yes, from Denmark. And we'll actually get there too, because I have something from Denmark to show you later on. Okay, but it's Celtic. Now, I'd like to move on to the inhabitants of these islands, by the way, weren't culturally isolated from the continent even before the Roman occupation. There's a Greek, Pythias of Massalia, who had gone to Britain in 325 BCE and found a flourishing trade in tin, which had been mined predominantly in Cornwall since 2150 BCE. The natives zipped around in wooden boats covered with leather. The 9th century book, Navigatio Brandani Abbatis, even claims that St. Brendan of Ireland reached the Americas in one of these. The tin trade was managed by tribes in Gaul, who acted as middlemen. But continuous cultural contact was certainly taking place.
You know, I have a question, by the way,
Sure.
Jane. Outside of all these stories, kind of legendary stories about King Arthur, do we know anything historically if there were any organized resistance to the Anglo-Saxon invasion?
Well,
or migration?
before King Arthur, the Romans were there.
No, I
And
mean,
so
when they left.
after they left,
Yeah.
I'm sure there was localized resistance, but it hasn't too much made it into the histories. The histories themselves are really quite questionable. I'm going to read you some of them at the time that are contemporary with him or somewhat closer than most of the stuff we know about, we think we know about Arthur, come from France or from Mallory the Morte d'Arthur. But the earlier stuff, there's historians and even a saint who wrote about it. And it's very short, and they don't really mention too much else. Does that answer it?
Yeah, I guess there's
Okay.
not much.
Probably not. Maybe there wasn't that much invasion. After all, there was the nonsense about Vortigern, you know.
Yeah, it was probably more kind of like a migration. Yeah.
I just want to tell people to please type your questions in the chat so that we can read to Jane, so that it will be more interactive in that regard. And sorry, one more question, Jane. Why was it thought that the King Arthur was related to Romans? Why was there a thought?
Well, first of all, I just explained that his uncle had a Roman name. Secondly, if you read Geoffrey of Monmouth, as I will, well, I'm not going to read that particular part, I'm just going to tell you about it, but he had actually gone to Rome to fight the Roman emperor. He was known later on as Artorius or Rex Arturus, and basically his father was Constantine, and somehow or other that got mixed up with Constantine, and that's why he's I don't know how to describe it. Obviously he wasn't Roman, but there were connections.
Well, why don't we further? I think that question is better asked after you've done most of the presentation.
Okay. All right, so let me go on now. And according to the most contemporary stories, those before the 12th century, Arthur was conceived at Tetanuja Castle in Cornwall, the way most babies are conceived. Although there was a community at Tetanuja from much earlier time, Tetanuja Castle was constructed and enlarged by Reginald, the Earl of Cornwall, and enlarged by his descendant Richard around the end of the 12th century, a little bit into the next, particularly because they were much taken with Geoffrey of Monmouth's tales. However, the site was in use from the 5th century, so that's okay, if not before. There had been an extensive monastery there, and more particular, around 30 miles away is a 7-foot-high monolith with the inscription in 6th century style, Hic Jacet Drustanus Filius Cunumori. That's Here lies Drustanus, which is the Roman name for Drustan, which is the Welsh name for what we usually call Tristan. And you see the confusion there, right? Or not confusion, but the associations. In a straight line, as straight as it gets in that part of the world, halfway between the monolith and Tetanuja is something called Castle d'Or, or Castle of Gold, which was excavated in the 30s. It's definitely the residence of a chieftain with 2 halls, one 90 feet by 40 feet, and the other 65 feet by 35 feet. It was first settled in pre-Roman times, but it had been abandoned and was reoccupied during the 5th and 7th centuries, which is good for our time. Okay, so this is Tetanuja Castle that was built by the Earls of Cornwall. It looks very ancient and very romantic, but it really isn't. The tourists love it. When we look over here at the site, by the way, how many have been there? I want to go. It's such a fortress. Here are the nice sea caves. You can store your boats out there to defend yourself from a sea attack, even if one was possible, which it isn't. Here's the bridge, which at the last moment you could escape if you had to. It's all very, very good.
But that bridge can't date in that period. That's modern.
Yes, of course it's modern, yes. But it is said that there was a bridge there originally. Okay. Now, did I explain already about the maze? No, I didn't, right? Okay. This maze is found a couple of miles from Tetanuja, and it also looks very antique. And if you've read the Pickwick Papers, maybe you remember the episode where Pickwick comes on a rock with some letters on it and even writes a paper and a presentation about how ancient it is, and some guy gets mad and turns it over and says, Sam, his mark is what it's saying. So we really don't know if this is ancient or not. but mazes were very popular in the 19th century. And this brings us to the old church at Glastonbury. And the old church at Glastonbury it is where Arthur is said to be buried. At Glastonbury Abbey, actually, which succeeded this. But his bones were discovered in the old church in 1190 during the demolition of the church at this site. In 1290, a monk wrote of their ceremonial reburying in the abbey and wrote that the bones were initially interred in 548, which is pretty good chronology. Glastonbury Abbey, whose ruins these are, Reformation was rough, I guess, was constructed in the 8th century. The old church had been constructed with wattle and dowel, which I looked up, turns out to be interlaced wooden sticks, which are held together by mud on each side. Apparently it worked. William of Malmesbury wrote in 1130 that it was founded by missionaries in 166 CE. Legend has it that the first such missionary was Joseph of Arimathea, a rich tin merchant and friend or brother of the Virgin Mary, and that Jesus, still a child, accompanied him, which would place it awfully early in the 1st century. Joseph of Joseph of Arimathea had used the Holy Grail, the cup from which Jesus drank at the Last Supper, in order to catch his blood when he was on the cross and wounded by the lance. And Joseph transported it to Glastonbury, where it was kept. You see the nice pointy arches on these. Okay, do we have a specialist in medieval architecture in the house? Well, that's a shame, because this original castle, which is the Castle Brest, Chateau Brest, B-R-E-S-T, was 3rd century. So indeed, if there was a landslide, he might have spent his childhood here. I don't know how much was added later, but you notice that there's a lot of non-pointy stuff in the crenellations. Well, I see a lot of that in the Crusader Castle, so no.
That looks pretty recent. Guns and high walls don't go together very well.
Okay.
So if somebody's building something, if you build a castle like that, you're probably a nobleman. Your neighbors probably don't like you very much. Maybe your peasants don't like you, and they don't have guns. They don't have artillery.
Okay. Yeah, this is, I don't know how this got in here. This is Agamemnon's tomb at Mycenae. Okay, this is the last time when I passed misinformation. It is not Agamemnon's tomb, but if you've ever been there, as I have, it's awfully reminiscent. And this, underneath it, is the interior of that. And again, if you've ever been to Agamemnon's tomb, it looks like that, only this part is stone and put together in a beautiful arch. And it is done without mortar.
Of course, I just wanted to add, Agamemnon, if anybody saw a movie, Troy, or read Homer, was leading the attack on Troy and Phrygians particularly, he was leader of Mycenaean Greeks, with, we all know Hector, Achilles, and he was in charge of the Greek armada.
Okay. And this is standing stones, and all of this is from the Orkney Islands. So looks like Stonehenge. I don't know how they got these things up, but all over the world, from Easter Island all the way around the world and back, somehow people without our modern machinery managed to do these things. Oh, come back here.
You should be able to go hit the slideshow button in that, shouldn't you?
It doesn't work for me. Maybe I started it wrong.
You know what? Why don't you reshare?
Okay,
Stop
whatever.
sharing
Yeah.
and reshare.
Okay, how do I do that? New
Well, it should
share?
make a difference.
Top,
yeah.
you have a stop sharing. It has like a red button, and then reshare again.
Oh, stop share.
Will that help?
Yeah, and then reshare again. Sorry.
Okay, share screen. And this time I will do this. Yes, here we are.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Wow.
Anyhow, these are all from the Orkney Islands. And this is what the Orkney Islands looks like, the coast and the cliffs and the bog. And of course, this looks very mysterious, and places that look like that attract legend formers. Okay, I promised you something from Denmark. Oh, why are we here? No, we're not here. I did mention that there were 4 tribes in Wales: Ordovices in the northwest, Dechiangli in the northeast, Demeti in the southwest, and Siures in the southeast. When the Romans left, they repronounced all of these. All the tribes got together and settled all their territorial claims and other differences to make peace for the benefit of their people. Just kidding. What do you think happened? After a full day of slaughtering each other, the warriors would gather in their halls and get drunk on mead, which, take my word for it, is very easy to do. The Greeks had commented on their fondness for wine, but unfortunately, I don't think there's any place to grow grapes in the British Isles. Correct me if I'm wrong. And of course, their links to the Mediterranean were completely lessened. It wasn't until the Norman invasions of Wales, 1067, 1081, that the lid came down on the boiling pot or cauldron. Or maybe because the Cymry, which is how you pronounce the people of Wales, Cornwall, and Brittany, now had a common enemy again. Literacy returned, at least more than it had. The songs of the bards were actually written down. They were somewhat changed since the population was now Christian, but still redolent of the earlier religion. Others were totally invented using hints from the early materials, perhaps, as I did at the beginning. Writing isn't like archaeology. There is no stratigraphy, there's no carbon-14 dating, but you can make a pretty good guess by comparing styles and cultural references. Basically, you know it when you hear it. One of the earliest references to Arthur, as well as Gawain, and the love-obsessed Tristan, Tristan mentioned earlier, is in the Welsh Triads, which were in existence when the Normans arrived. The Triads, and earlier, the Triads list 3 individuals or 3 things that are alike in some way, and it is supposed they were used in bardic schools to help with the memory. And here we have the 3 powerful swineherds of the island of Britain, and I will read you only the one that has to do with Arthur, although he wasn't exactly a swineherd. Tristan, a son of Taluk, who guarded the swine of Mark, son of Mercian, while the swineherd went to ask Essel to come to a meeting with him. And Arthur was seeking to obtain 1 pig from among them, either by deceit or force, but he did not get it. Okay, and then goes on to a couple of other swineherds. And there are other Welsh triads that mention Arthur. For example, the 3 unrestrained ravagings of the island of Britain. The first, when Mordred came to Arthur's court in Kellyveg in Cornwall and left neither food nor drink that he did not consume. And he dragged Guinevere from her royal chair, and then he struck a blow upon her. The second, when Arthur came to Mordred's court, he left neither food nor drink in the court. The third, when Ethan the Wily came to the court of Riderish, neither food nor drink nor beast alive did he leave. And finally, the 3 dishonored men who were in the island of Britain. The first was Alfalwe, son of Hugh, son of Beli. He, that's Alfalwe, first summoned Julius Caesar and the men of Rome to the island and caused the payment of 3,000 pounds in money. This is a later adaptation because, of course, the Celts called their money staters, as tribute from the island every year because of a quarrel with Caswallon, his uncle. Geoffrey of Monmouth identifies Alfalwe as Androgus, who brought a British unit to help Caesar against Pompey in the Civil War. There was a historical Antidrigos, whose coins are extant and date from 50 to 40 BC, which is right. The second, Ruithrin the Thin, who is Vortigern, who first gave land to the Saxons on the island by inviting Hengst and Horsa to help him fight the Picts in 449, and made the bad move of stiffing them for their promised payment, and was the first to enter into an alliance with them. He caused the death of Custennin the Younger, son of Custennin the Blessed. His treachery exiled the brothers Emrys, that's Ambrosius Bledig, which is the warlord thing, and Uther Pendragon, Arthur's father, from this island to Armorica. And in the end, Uther and Emrys burned Gwytherin in Castle Gwytherin Yon, beside the Y, that's the river W-Y-E, not the YMCA, in a single conflagration to avenge their brother. You'll notice that I've said nothing about the Saxons up till now. Yes, you have noticed it. This is because they knew enough to keep the Cumbria off the conquest menu.
Jane, I have a question on the chat.
Yeah.
So the question is coming from Carol. She's saying, if not real people, could Arthur and his knights simply be creation like the tall tales of John Henry, Paul Bunyan, etc. in the USA?
No, there's a little too much of Arthur in the history to dismiss him. I shouldn't give the game away, really, I shouldn't. But it might be a mystery, a mixture of history and fantasy. Certainly after the 12th century, it's all fantasy and good writers too. I mean, Mallory is great, but to dismiss him as non-existent is not an option because, of course, there was opposition to the Saxons. Battles are recorded. There certainly were warlords. There certainly were kings, and there's no reason to believe that one of them was not named Arthur. Okay.
And of course, Saxons, I mean, originally is Germanic, right? Tribes that originally came, obviously, they all came from essentially from the area of Scandinavia into Germanic tribes, and then made their way to England, Anglo-Saxons. And Anglos was, kind of also a Germanic tribe. But they also had this famous writing, Beowulf, right? There was a Saxon, so to speak, documentary, so to speak. So could this be something like a Beowulf, with mystic type of powers of this person and stuff like that?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know, because I'm not an expert, but maybe somebody here can help me. I don't know of any possible support for Beowulf.
Okay, my understanding is that Beowulf, the story of Beowulf is very recognizably Christian. Apparently, when you read up on Beowulf, he doesn't kill any people. And that's really unusual for a Saxon hero. Usually they've chopped up dozens of people. So Beowulf, it appears to be a fairly standard Saxon thing. You've got a hall, you've got the warrior chief surrounded by his band of hardy warriors. And for some reason, there are monsters attacking them, and Beowulf has to dispose of them. He's a ring bearer. He hands out gifts to his people. That's sort of the traditional Saxon thing, and it's more of a traditional sort of Aryan Indo-European thing, which probably the Celts were into to some extent.
Could be. I mean,
so I wouldn't tie Beowulf to. I would say that Beowulf almost certainly is fictional. It's a good story.
Dragons are hard to
Woden,
come
if we
by.
go back to Woden, probably at some point there was a real guy named Woden.
oh, well,
So
maybe-
you're reversing ehumerization. You're saying that gods were created out of people. It's usually
Yeah, well, it's
the other
probably,
way.
if you look at the old pagan cultures, I think the gods were, a lot of that stuff was sort of a form of ancestor worship. Like when the Roman emperors died, the Senate got together and more often than not voted that they were to be worshipped as gods. They were deified.
oh, I see.
So like you sit back here, and like you guys would sit there, and the Senate would pass a motion saying that George H.W. Bush should be worshipped as a god.
Interesting.
Well, could they?
We have a
So
question.
let me continue this, which is
Yeah.
it's a nice detour, but
Yeah.
we have a lot to do.
Yeah,
We have
and
a
Arthur's
question-
Christian makes it different. Yeah.
We have a question from the chat. Is Alfred the Great, which is portrayed in the series of Vikings, I don't know if anybody watched that series, connected as he was supposed to be king of the Saxons in the Wessex? I don't know what I said either. Is Alfred the Great connected as he was supposed to be the king of the Saxons in the Wessex? I don't know what it has anything to do with. Oh, they're saying maybe Alfred the Great is the King Arthur. I'm not sure.
No, Alfred the Great's
much
historical
later.
person.
It's much later, right? I mean,
Yes, it's a 9th century,
yeah, it's
Alfred the Great,
right now-
and we're talking about events that happened in the 5th or
Yeah.
6th century.
right. This
And
is
Alfred
right
was definitely Saxon.
Right.
And he's of the line of Cerdic. And apparently Cerdic is a Celtic name.
Oh,
Okay.
all right,
Um,
Jean, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm the wrong person to ask.
Yeah.
My knowledge pretty much expires with the Hallstatt period. Okay. Now, where was it? Oh yes, the staters. We talked about that, and Arthur Madrod. Let me go back. When Arthur left with him the government of the island of Britain, at the same time when he himself went across the sea to oppose the Emperor Lys, when I talked about that, who had dispatched messengers demanding tribute in the measure that it had been paid from the time of Caswallaun until the time of Custinian the Blessed, Arthur's grandfather. And Arthur mustered the most select warriors of his kingdom and led them across the sea, and they met beyond the mountain of Munir, the Alps, and an untold number were slain on that day. And in the end, Arthur encountered the emperor and slew him, and Arthur's best men were slain there. When Mordred, which is written here as Medrod, heard that Arthur's host was dispersed, he turned against Arthur, and the Saxons and the Picts and the Scots united with him to hold this island against Arthur. And when Arthur heard that, he turned back with all that had survived of his army and succeeded by violence in landing on this island in opposition to Medrod. And then there took place the Battle of Camlan between Arthur and Medrod, and was himself wounded to death. And from that wound he died and was buried in a hall on the island of Avalon. which combines the once and future, he's not dead part with the Avalon part. Arthur, the name Avalon is also connected in some way with Glastonbury. I think there's an island near that or something near that by that name. Arthur is also included as one of the 3 frivolous bards of Britain for revealing the hiding place of the head of Bran the Blessed, which was supposed to have kept the island safe from Saxons, because he did not want Britain defended other than by his own strength. So it's rather selfish of him and arrogant, if I must say. Now we come to Taliesin. Taliesin is a semi-historical figure. He's called the chief of bards, and he lived in the latter part of the 6th century, if he lived, at least according to the 9th century Historia Brittonum by Nennius. That's the history of the Britons. A half century too late for the generally accepted date of the semi-historical Battle of Baden, which was supposed to be in 516, in which Arthur routed the Saxons, and a decade or two too late for that of Camlan, in which Arthur received his fatal wound. There is a compilation of poetry attributed to Taliesin, Clifford Taliesin, which just means the Book of Taliesin, from the 14th century. But the authorship of some inclusions is debated. This one sounds genuinely old. It correlates with both of the spoils of a Newfoundland and Culhwch and Olwen from the Mabinogion. In this poem, Taliesin claims to be a member of the expedition led by Arthur that stole the cauldron of Gernow. I am honored and praised. Song was heard in the four-peaked fortress for its revolutions. My poetry from the cauldron it was uttered. From the breath of 9 maidens it was kindled. The cauldron of the chief of Anufin, what is its fashion? A dark ridge around its border and pearls. It does not boil the food of a coward. It has not been destined. The flashing sword of Liao has been lifted to it, and in the hands of Liemana it was left. And before the door of hell, lamps burned. And when we went with Arthur, brilliant difficulty, except 7, none rose up from the fortress of mead drunkenness. I merit not the Lord's little men of letters. Beyond the glass fortress, they did not see the valor of Arthur. 6,000 men stood upon the wall. It was difficult to speak with their sentinel. 3 fullnesses of Prydwen went with Arthur. Except 7, none rose up from the fortress of the hindrance. Monks howl like a choir of dogs from an encounter with lords. Who knew? Is there one course of wind? Is there one course of water? Is there one spark of fire of fierce tumult? Monks packed together like young wolves from an encounter with lords. Who know? They do not know when midnight and dawn divide, nor wind what its course, what its onrush, what place it ravages, what region it strikes. The grave of the saint is hidden in the other world, both grave and ground. I praise the Lord, great Prince, that I be not sad. Christ endows me. Okay, a little explanation here. Taliesin is saying that Dermwick's portrait revolved like the view at the Marriott. Another reading is Anufin, maybe the other world. The raid took place during a feast, and Taliesin's poetry is sung from the cauldron. The magic of the cauldron is 9 virgins must breathe on it to start it boiling, and it will boil the food of a coward. Prydwen was Arthur's ship. In the Mabinogion, tale of Kuluk and Olwen. The cauldron was on Olwen's wedding registry, which had been ordered by Ysbyddaden, her giant father. He wouldn't let her marry without it, perhaps because he was fated to die if she did get married. That's why he required Kuluk to steal it from Dernwig, hoping he'd die in this attempt. Kuluk, who could tell a setup when he saw it, petitioned Arthur to help him. Taliesin does not appear to like monks very much, and his list of things they can't do coincides with what Druids were good at, which is astronomy and weather. Was the reference to Christ in the last line just added for safety? And when he says he praised the Lord, is he talking about the Lord, or is he talking about a great prince? When he talks about the little men of letters, is he talking about their military advisors? I don't know. But just a word I can't resist about cauldrons. They were symbols of power and frequently attributed with magic powers, as in Taliesin's poem. This particular one that I have the slide of was found in a bog near Gundestrup, Denmark. It has been called the Rosetta Stone of Celtic mythology and bears images that immediately to all of us recall the Pashupati seal from Mohenjo-Daro of the Indus Valley civilization, particularly the horned god Cernunnos, who is surrounded by animals, two of which are said to be elephants. Where are my elephants? Oh, I have to go on to the next slide if I want elephants. All right, let's do that. And here is the slide. And as you can see, these are the elephants. They have indeed tusks. They have rather little ears, which makes them Asian rather than Africans. Their tongue is hanging out, or this might be a trunk. Notice that the horse is endowed with something like that. Are they swallowing a snake? And it has wings because, well, the accuracy, and these have hyena spots also. But you'll see, once I take this away, yeah, come back here. No. How accurate the pictures are of the animals on the Indus Valley. But the pose is right. We've got horns here. Maybe that's enough. I don't know.
So Jane, I don't understand. So this is a connection to the Harappan Empire in India, Mohenjo-Daro?
You know, connections can always be made. As a matter of fact, if you're looking for magic cauldrons, if you go further east, just a little bit, you'll find the cauldrons of the Zhou dynasty in China. And these ones,
1 second, there's something going on.
oh, that's my fan.
What? What is it?
It's my computer fan. It's trying to keep the computer alive. It'll stop in a minute.
Is it what's going on with your computer? It's not.
Yeah. Okay.
It's very staticky. It's very staticky, Jane. It's very staticky.
Well, I heard a kind of mechanical whining noise of some kind, but I didn't see where it came from.
But
I think she's disappearing on us. Sorry.
there we go.
Jane, we can hear every second word.
Oh. Maybe if I come in on my phone, it will be better.
Well, I can hear it okay
It is-
right now.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
okay. Okay, fine.
Stopping now.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the Zhou dynasty cauldrons, there were a bunch of them, and only the king could use them for sacrifices, and they would change in size and weight depending on the virtue of the state. So you see that all over the world, except possibly for our little piece of it, had magic cauldrons. Okay, and let's move.
Do we know if that you said that cauldron was outside of Denmark?
Yeah, it was Denmark. It's been called, that particular cauldron has been called the Rosetta Stone of Celtic mythology.
Okay. Do we know it was manufactured there?
What's the sound?
No. In a word,
What is this sound?
that's my computer fan. If I try to turn the fan off, the computer will fry,
Oh,
I see.
but it always stops in a little bit, so be patient with it, please. The only other thing I can do to help is possibly call in on what number I'm supposed to call
No,
in.
no, it's okay. Just keep going.
Okay. So now, would you like to take a second look at the cauldron while I talk? Because
I'm okay. I mean, yeah, you know, the elephants are pretty horrible, but the guy's probably, if the guy's never seen an elephant, that's probably a good attempt based on a description by somebody.
Yeah, or he might have seen it in his youth and forgotten.
Hmm.
Okay. They were symbols of, yeah, we covered that. Let me get back to the cauldron. Here, because now I'm going to talk about the Mabinogion. The tales in the Mabinogion, the first syllable is Mab, is Welsh for child, was translated into the 19th century from the 14th century Red Book of Hergus, and an incomplete manuscript from 1325 called the White Book of Ritter. The first translation to be published, which was the inspiration for Tennyson's Idylls of the King, was that of Lady Charlotte Guest. And I can't resist a 25-second detour here, who was an amazing lady. Besides penning the translation, she managed the family ironwork. She gave birth to 10 children. She flirted with Disraeli when she was young. And after her husband's death, in her spare time was active in promoting education throughout the British Isles. We owe the enormous Assyrian reliefs to the Metropolitan Museum, which are in the Metropolitan Museum, to her. Originally a gift of the archaeologist Austin Layard. They passed through her estate to the museum. You know, kids never want the furniture. The most detailed appearance of King Arthur is in the story how Culhwch wed Alwyn, which is mentioned above. For me, the tale betrays its early origin in its two great lists, one of which is a staple. They're both staples of Bronze Age epics. They're always listed in those. For example, Homer's catalog of the ships. The 39 treasures to be supplied, including the cauldron, from Taliesin's poem, are all described with their place of where they're supposed to be stolen from and their possession given, and each with the formulaic ending, the giant saying that the task will be too difficult, and Culhwch answering that he will find it easy. And I suspect that they did a little call and response with the audience who probably came in on the easy part. Okay, in the tale, as in the poem, Arthur sails with his followers to Gernow Castle and kills everybody there, thus securing the magic cauldron. This is basically an act of piracy and shows a much rougher Arthur than the one we are used to from Mallory and Marie de Grasse, but in my mind, more authentic. Throughout the world, minus our hemisphere, where cauldrons are worshipped. Another Arthur Mabinogi is the Spoils of a Newfoundland, which pretty much covers the same material as Taliesin's poem. And that is the end of the early sources. So now I'm going to move on to the historians, and I hope I'll be able to answer your questions there. And what happened to the Celtic areas after the Romans went away? Well, Ireland did fine. They had no Roman camps, they didn't trade with them. The far side of Hadrian's Wall barely registered the Roman exodus. In Wales, the picture was very different. They had been part of the economy. In the formerly Roman emperor area, there was a 20% decline in population between 400 and 600, on top of a slower slide that began around 150 and started to accelerate with the Roman abandonment of their camp at Caerleon. With fewer people to feed, forests took over many of the previously cultivated fields. However, the British still traded with the Mediterranean, and one of their imports was the so-called Plague of Justinian, which struck Britain in 550. The Angles and the Saxons didn't trade with the Celtic areas or any part of Europe, so they weren't affected, but at least one respectable estimate put the mortality, not the morbidity, but the mortality in Britain at 50%. This is why I don't have pretty pictures to show you of buildings from that particular area. Even the number of hordes have gone down tremendously, although warfare and lack of peace and security obviously increased. So we are looking at an area of terrible poverty, disease, and death. Literacy was most likely confined to the monasteries, and no wonder Taliesin despised the monks who ate well and were insulated from all of this. So first, we're going to visit the Venerable Bede. He's another amazing person. He was born in 672 and died in 735. His work was not confined to his Historia Ecclesiastica, but also included De Rerum Naturam, which explained the moon's influence on the tides and the changing length of daylight due to, get this, the spherical nature of the earth. No doubt it was remembered from the classical times, but it had a long time to go away, and most likely among the uneducated probably did. This is not a kind of person who makes up myths, which is why, discouragingly, there's no one mention of Arthur in either his ecclesiastical history or his greater chronicles. But he dealt with secular princes only if their lives gave a moral lesson. And piracy and incest and stealing pigs, all of these would be a disqualifier. Okay, the next guy is actually a saint, Saint Gildas. And there were two lives of Saint Gildas. Saint Gildas, is one of Bede's sources, was for his Historia Britanniae on the destruction and conquest of the Britons by Saint Gildas. Gildas doesn't mention Arthur either, but he does mention a defeat by Ambrosius Aurelianus. No, that's the Arthur's uncle, not Arthur, of the Saxons at a battle of Badon Hill. Gildas was born the year he gives for that battle, 516, and he died in 570. So he's the most contemporary one we've got. There were definitely battles. One candidate for this particular battlefield is the site of Badbury Hill Fort. And now I will move to Badbury Hill Fort, and you can see this is actually fortified and has walls. Gildas describes the battle as a siege, and if so, it would have taken place at a walled town or hill fort. Another candidate is Bath, which was a major Roman settlement. The Welsh for Bath is Baden. Badbury Hill Fort is around 70 miles from Caerleon, which is my favorite candidate for Arthur's court, and Bath's distance is 40 miles. And if this was Arthur's court, well, it's a good policy to let the enemy do the walking and run low on supplies and morale if you have a choice. On the other hand, Nennius speaks of Arthur penetrating to Baden Hill, which suggests that it would be less distant. The Saxons, if the Saxons were the besieged party at Baden, which appears to have no water, bad, but good for the home team, and Bath would be the other round. Anybody wants to make a guess? Don't all leap at once. I haven't introduced Ambrosius Aurelianus, but I better do that now. He's supposedly and improbably the brother of Uther Pendragon, Arthur's father. The name Pendragon, by the way, means chief dragon, presumably great general. Even though Wales' flag has a red dragon on it, come on. Oh, because I have to do this now. Yes, there we are. The Welsh for dragon is drag. There is no translation of dragon in Cornish, but the Scots Gaelic word for dragon is dragon, made possible another link of Arthur with the Orkneys. Which I don't know the answer to what we call their dragons. Aurelianus is obviously a Latin name, and according to Geoffrey of Monmouth, the brother's father was a King Custinian, which has somehow got mixed up with Constantine the Great, who left Britain in 306 after getting himself proclaimed Roman emperor by his legionnaires, so much too early to be Arthur's grandfather. There was probably a King Custinian of Domnoria, which is another name for Cornwall, but he was 6th century, which is a little too late. Uther and Igraine, after their marriage, gave Arthur the sister Anna, which I talked about, who takes the place of Morgause as the mother of Mordred and the wife of Blunt of Orkney. The confusion dissipates if this was a sworn brotherhood, or maybe it wasn't a brotherhood at all. Anyhow, Arthur is sometimes referred to as a dux bellorum, or war leader. Because of this, it has been argued that Aurelianus was Arthur, making him his own nephew. And this gives me a headache, so I'll leave this and go to Nennius. Now, Nennius was a monk. 2 facts I have found out about him. 1, he was a student of Elvodugus, who died in 809. And 2, he escaped a massacre of monks in 613. Think about it. The authorship of a Historia Brittonum, which is a history of Britain, not of the Britons, is attributed to him. It really reads as if he made it up as he went along. According to him, Britain was founded by Brutus, a descendant of Aeneas, who himself is a descendant of King Saturn, who built the walls of Troy. Nennius mentions Ambrosius and names him as a great king among the kings of Britain. Given the era under discussion, king is probably a synonym for regional warlord, but Ambrosius is given a preeminence among them. As for Arthur, the actual year that Nennius' discussion of him begins is tied to the time that St. Germanus, a historical Welsh-born prelate, left Wales for Armagh, and that must have been between 393 and 418. I will quote Nennius's paragraph devoted to Arthur in entirety. Then it was that the magnanimous Arthur, with all the kings and military force of Britain, fought against the Saxons. Although there were many more noble than himself, that's quoted a lot to show that he was a warlord and not a king. Yet he was 12 times chosen as their commander and was as often conqueror. The first battle in which he engaged was at the mouth of the river Glenny. The second, third, and fourth, and fifth were at another river by the Britons called Douglas in the regions Lynnuis. The sixth on the river Bassus. The seventh in the wood Celidon, which the Britons call Celidon. And by the way, that wood was so extensive in those days that it's about an analogy, keeping the scale of locating a battle in America in the state of Pennsylvania. The eighth was near Brenin Castle, where Arthur bore the image of the Holy Virgin Mother of God, I told you so, upon his shoulders, and through the power of our Lord Jesus Christ and the Holy Mary, put the Saxons to flight and pursued them the whole day with great slaughter. The ninth was at the city of the legions, which is called Caerleon. The 10th was on the banks of the river Triads, sorry about that, and the 11th was on the mountain Gregory. The 12th was a most severe contest when Arthur penetrated to the hill of Badon. In this engagement, 940 fell by his hand alone, no one but the Lord affording him assistance. In all these engagements, the Britons were successful, for no strength can avail against the will of the Almighty. Most of these locales are debatable, except for Caerleon. And while we're on the subject of sites, you may be curious about the location of Camelot. Camelot isn't even mentioned until Chrétien de Troyes, who wrote it in France from 1159 to 1190. Chrétien also introduced Lancelot and his love affair with Guinevere. Well, Arthur had to have a court somewhere if he was a king, or even a warlord. Why not Caerleon? One of three major Roman encampments is there, and Geoffrey mentions it as the place where Arthur was crowned and Mordred was conceived. But Geoffrey, who was born less than 20 miles away, had an active imagination, which he often used. Strengthening the case for Caerleon, which I will show. Come on, guys. Oh. Yes. Is that whatever strategic reasons the Romans had for siting a major camp there would still be valid after they left. Even now, the early structures convey a sense of permanence and power, good things to associate with a royal court. If you visit, the town is charming and the ruins are well worth seeing. And this, of course, is the barracks left over. This is obviously an artist's reconstruction of a Roman theater, which would have been on the built on this foundation. However, when I was there, my guidebook said that this was a riding ring for the Romans, and no doubt Geoffrey may have believed that. And I think it's a wonderful place, if you think a building was there, to put a round table, don't you? This is the bath, and that is Caerleon.
Wow.
Meanwhile, Mordred, cozy in Camelot, if it was there, would not want to march his troops far from home, which is an argument for Camelot slight closer to the battlefield than Caerleon. With Geoffrey, we have reached the end of our little journey. Everything after Geoffrey is pure romance, and probably his was too. Geoffrey was born Galfridus Arturus, yes, the same name, in 1110, most probably in Monmouth, Wales, a mere 20 miles walk from Caerleon. His first ecclesiastical connection was at the Monmouth Priory, right here, a small Benedictine monastery. His duties probably included gardening and manuscript copying, and I like to think of him as a teenager scribbling away on the sly, page after page of Arthur's story when he should have been doing something else. Those pages eventually became the Historia Regum Britanniae, the history of the kings of Britain. The book was a great success, and no wonder. Geoffrey writes with imagination, enthusiasm, and the gift of making the characters real human beings. By the way, he invented Merlin and even wrote a book called The Life of Merlin, which I haven't read yet, but will, about his creation, whom he based on Merlin the Wise from early Welsh sources. The Normans, not surprisingly, loved it because, like Arthur, they had fought the Saxons, and by embracing Arthur, they could seem to be his spiritual descendants and rightful lords of Arthur's land. Here I'll read Geoffrey's Merlin speaking prophecy and advising Vortigern, the jerk who hired the Saxons to come help and get rid of the Picts and then stiff them. Geoffrey pictures Merlin as young and virile and not the gray beard we're used to. Flee thou from the fire of the sons of Constantine, if flee thou mayest. Even now are they fitting forth their ships. Even now they are leaving the coast of Armorica behind and spreading their sails upon the deep. They will make for the island of Britain and invade the Saxon race. That accursed people will they subdue, but first they will shut up thyself in a tower and burn thee. Unto thine own bane didst thou betray their father, Constantine, and invite the Saxons to the island. Thou didst invite them as thy bodyguard. They have come over as their headsmen, that is the executioners. 2 deaths await thee, nor is it clear which one of the twain thou mayest first escape. For upon the one side, the Saxons will lay waste thy kingdom and will seek to compass thy death. Upon the other, the 2 brethren, Aurelius and Uther, will enter into thy land, seeking to revenge their father's death upon thee. Seek out refuge, if thou mayest. Tomorrow they will land in Taunus. The faces of the Saxons shall be red with blood. Hengist shall be slain, and thereafter shall Aurelius be crowned king. He shall give peace unto the nations. He shall restore the churches, yet shall he die of poison. Unto him shall succeed his brother Uther Pendragon, whose days shall likewise be cut short by poison. Well, that's the first poison thing I've heard mentioned. So maybe Geoffrey made that up. I don't know. Does anybody know if there's another reference to them being poisoned or?
That's a staple of warrior literature. I think warriors are real men. They're either overwhelmed by massive numbers or they're stabbed in the back or poisoned by somebody.
Yeah, quite possibly.
I mean,
No, I did the lecture on King Pyrrhus of Epirus a few weeks ago, and I made the point that it was Greek tragedies being punished by the gods, and instead of being crushed in battle, he was hit on the head by a tile thrown by somebody's mother, which is not a manly way to go out.
Well, it was actually a pot of sorry for my language, pot of shit that the people used to throw out of their window, and one.
Oh no, it was deliberate. She was he was fighting with her son.
Yeah, because her son
realized he was in trouble.
Yeah, her son was getting killed. Right.
Yeah, Plutarch says tile.
Correct.
But it's absolutely, he doesn't identify her. They're obviously lower class people we don't care about. It was not the way they go. So being poisoned is the way normal manly heroes get it if they're not defeated in battle.
That's true.
Besides, poison is a woman's weapon.
I haven't
possibly, or a cowardly man, one or the other.
Well, the thing is, the poisonous was not a Roman way. Particularly, it was a Greek court, like Olympia, for example. The mother of Alexander the Great. She was, an expert at this. poisoning people and stuff like that. But I have a question, Jane, or anybody who may know. After Romans withdrew from England, I mean, they must have experienced such an incredible downside in trade and anything, because Roman soldiers, besides being soldiers, they were also builders, right? They were building roads, they were building all this stuff, and then now they're leaving, and all this trade that they go all the way from Rome to, Britannia, it's all gone. Everything is gone. They were trying to get Romans so badly with, we know with rebel led by Boudica, and stuff like that. I think she was a Pixen, right? I'm not sure.
No, she was real.
No, I know,
She was
I
real,
know.
but she was also hundreds of years earlier.
But she was her tribe was a Pixen, right? The Pixens that you were mentioning.
You're talking about Picts?
Yeah, Pix. Sorry, Pix.
No, not Picts. Picts were way up north.
Yeah, I
No,
agree.
her tribe was different. It's actually known. I forgot the name of it.
I can't remember it either. Definitely, she's definitely Celtic though, and she was a queen and all that.
Right. So, but my question is like, what now Romans withdraw, and then that's probably why the folklore is tying King Arthur to Romans, because it was good times, right? Everybody made trade with them, kind of lived around the area, stuff like that. Somebody's saying from Dean Byrne it was Icenic tribe.
Yeah, that's what the Boudica was, queen of Iceni.
I see.
Yeah. And the Iceni, of
trade-
course, took the brunt of Caesar's invasion.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I didn't mention this, but Britain relied on the Romans to keep them safe from the Saxons and the Picts and all that. Everything from Hadrian's walls. That's why the legionnaires were there. They had made pretty much peace with the locals as much as could be. And they were trying to keep the Saxons out. They were trying to keep all the Gaulish tribes and all the invaders out of Rome.
I think
and out of
Scots.
the Roman Emperor.
I
And
think
then-
Scots they wanted to keep out with the Hadrian wall. It was
Well,
Scots.
them too.
But
No,
watch, at that time, the Scots were in Ireland. They came
No,
over
no,
here.
no. There were
Ireland's out of the
tribes.
picture.
Yeah, there were other tribes up north. I don't think Saxons made it in the 2nd century AD. I don't think they made it
Oh,
into
no,
the
we're not
Britain.
talking 2nd century.
No,
I'm
but the
talking
Hadrian Wall was built in the 2nd
yeah.
century.
Oh, no, Hadrian's Wall was definitely to stop the invasions from the north.
Right.
But I'm talking now, the 4th century, when things were going south in the Roman Empire in a way. And they needed to contract, but they were still committed to this defense. And so one time, pretty much right after the Britons sent a message to the Roman Emperor, hey, we're in trouble. And they sent over a legion, and the legion got rid of the invaders. And then the next time they begged for help, and the Romans sent a few troops. And the next time they begged for help, and the Romans said, hey, you're on your own, kids. And that's when the trouble really started. And yes, to answer your question, things were horrible in Wales after the Romans left.
Yeah, here is the
I have
question.
another question on the chat. Did Romans sail to the English Isles or march across Europe? They marched, right?
No,
And
they already had troops in Gallia, so they just had to cross the channel. Usually, all the troops were probably ordered from the Gallia to go into Britain.
But which emperor came and they called him the Emperor of Beaches when he was told his legionnaires collect the seashells and we're taking over the beaches of the isle. And
That was Caligula.
Caligula.
Yeah, but that had nothing to do with Britain.
No,
I mean,
definitely not.
Yeah,
It hasn't been occupied by the Romans yet.
But-
Yeah,
Yeah,
a problem
go
I've
ahead.
got with I've got a problem with the Saxon invasion. I'm trying to read up on this and make sense of it. You are sitting on the border of some mighty empire. You have a horde of hairy, smelly barbarians. What can you do with them? And obviously, raping and pillaging is a possibility, but it's not the only possibility. If the empire is badly administered, if there's a very small ruling class, they could be so vulnerable to a surprisingly small barbarian horde, and then you're in control of the empire. And under those conditions, you don't rape and pillage. You actually are fairly orderly in your conduct.
Yeah, I think the
By Indo-European
Anglo-Saxons,
standards, it's not very
yeah,
orderly.
I
Yeah.
think Anglo-Saxons were more kind of like migrating, expanding into the Britain, and actually slowly, and that's why they replaced the language in most of the Britain, because a lot of local population migrated out of that area into the Wales of Cornwall, and as we know, in Britannia in France right now. So yeah, and those retain the language, but it's not just the conquest. You see, like for instance, Normans did the conquest, but they didn't change the language completely. They just influenced a bit, but the language still stayed Saxon, Anglo-Saxon. While Anglo-Saxons replaced the language, in the Britain, in the area where they lived. And I actually have an idea that maybe this whole story about Arthur is the defense of Welsh against the against the Saxon expansion, rather than Britons themselves.
Yes.
But so because they were kind of successful, because they did stop Saxon invasion, the Welsh specifically, and maybe these are the stories of that conflict that probably happened in that area of Monmouth, which is almost on the border, right?
Well, did the Romans occupy Wales?
No.
Monmouth,
Like I'm thinking,
at that point, Monmouth was pretty much part of a Welsh territory.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
wasn't.
Yeah, it
I'm
was
coming at
Welsh.
the point of view that the Saxons picked off the Roman governed areas. The places the Romans hadn't conquered were ruled by warrior kings of some sort who survived in power.
Yeah, but
Okay,
the Romans,
well-
they had agreement. They didn't go into the Wales and Cornwall. It wasn't worth it. It's actually
Yeah, it wasn't worth it. They were great fighters.
Right.
Of course, the descendants of the Welsh did eventually sit on the British throne, right? So I
Of course,
better
yeah.
get on. I have one more page and then I'm done. And then we can discuss at leisure, okay?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. So I want to describe, I'll read Geoffrey's description of Uther falling in love with King Gorlois' wife. The king accordingly celebrated the ceremony and made merry along with his barons, all of whom did make great cheer for that the king received them in such joyful wise. Among the rest, Gorlois, Duke of Cornwall, was there with his wife Igerna, that in beauty did surpass all the other dames of the whole of Britain. And when the king espied her amidst the others, he did suddenly wax so vain of her love, that paying no heed until none of the others, he turned all his attention only upon her. Only unto her did he send dainty tidbits from his own dish. Only unto her did he send the golden cups with messages through his familiars. Many a time did he smile upon her, and spoke merrily unto her withal. But when her husband did perceive all this, straightway he waxed wroth and retired from the court. And finally, my last, a battle scene. Aurelius pursueth him, and whomsoever he overtook upon his way, he either slew or made captive or bondsman. When therefore Hengist, because we're fighting the Saxons now, perceived that he was being hunted down of Aurelius, he was not minded to enter into the castle, but commanding his troops again to form in rank, decided to renew the battle, for he knew that the castle could no wise withstand Aurelius. and that all his defense lay in his own sword and spear. At last, when Aurelius had overtaken him, he also ranked his comrades in companies and charged right heartily upon him. Blood floweth everywhere, and the cries of the dying rouse the living to a fiercer wrath. At last the Saxons would prevail, had not a company of knights of the Armorican Britons come down upon them. For Aurelius had stationed them apart. When these charged down upon them, the Saxons were forced to give ground after being broken in rank, albeit nowise cut to pieces, and they were scarce able to form in rank again. Then the Britons advanced more heartily and harassed the enemy with one accord, nor did Aurelius stint to cheer on his men, to smite down those that came his way, to give chase to them that fled, and do all that man might do to comfort his wounded comrades. According to Geoffrey, Arthur named his son Constantine as heir. Constantine became king and killed Mordred's two sons in revenge for Arthur's death, and then became a monk, and that is that.
Yeah, there is also a story that Uhtred, right? Am I pronouncing it right? That he was a son of one of the short-lived emperors, Constantine III.
Wait. This was my confusion for a while because it kept coming out Constantine. No, the great emperor was a totally different Constantine.
No, I'm not talking about Constantine the Great. It was much earlier. I'm talking
Constantine the
about
Blessed.
Constantine what they call him, Constantine III. It was just a general. It was not connected to the imperial house at all. It was just acclaimed by the troops as an emperor. This is, I think, at the time of the Emperor Honorius, because we're talking about the beginning of the 5th century. Constantine was the beginning of the 4th century. No, this is entirely different, but he was, supposedly, it's one of the theories, I mean, because it's hard to establish historicity, but there was that general historical figure. They kind of tied it up to that Uhtred was his son, illegitimate son. Yeah.
Yeah, he was supposed to be the son of Constantine III.
Mhm.
Yes, not Constantine the Blessed or the big Constantine.
No, of course not. It's much later. I mean, it's like almost 100 years later.
Over. Okay, well, that's my talk.
Hey,
So-
that was incredible. I actually unmuted everybody. If you guys want to ask a question directly, go ahead. Just, be respectful. If somebody's talking, let them finish. Jane, thank you. This was incredible. Very elaborate. Thank you so much. And basically, I didn't know as much. I appreciate that you took your time and prepare for this. I know we've been preparing for this for a while, but I mean, you've been preparing for a while. I appreciate you, stepping forward and doing this. So anybody has any questions? Unmute yourself because I just unmuted. I let you guys, I'm going to ask to unmute.
Yeah, this was really good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. It's very interesting.
Please go ahead.
I'm grateful for all the help, actually.
Yeah, I mean, we work as a team. I appreciate, the help as well. Anybody has any questions or want to add anything? I mean,
At one point, how reliable was Geoffrey Monmouth regarded during the medieval? I was under the impression he was flagged as fiction almost immediately, but I'm looking at the Wikipedia page and they're saying they really didn't start questioning until the 16th century.
Well, actually, all that flirtation that went on between Uther and Gernow, I have found no other sources for that. I mean, he was writing a romance.
Interesting.
Yeah, but is there a source saying she behaved herself?
Yes.
It's interesting how, I mean, people are saying, like, for example, the character like Spartacus is also a made-up character. There's essentially a theory about that. So there's a lot of very interesting characters that, nations build their, propaganda around. For example, Stalin absolutely loved Spartacus' story and used it every which way he can to promote Stalin.
Well,
Okay, yeah.
that's an interesting thing. Some things become the soul of a country. I think the matter of Britain is very important to Britons and part of their identity. If you go over to China, the novel of the Three Kingdoms period is something that practically every Chinese person knows. This is part of their soul. If you look in America, you'll find that we base our image of rebel and gun-toting type of thing on the legends that we have. And I've often experimented by asking people if they can name 3 generals of the Civil War in America. And I will tell you that each and every time, if they're from New York, they will instantly name Grant because they know Grant's tomb. If they're not from New York, it is Robert Lee, it is Jeb Stuart, and it's Stonewall Jackson. That's who we think we are.
Oh, wow. That's
Isn't it ironic that the Britain right now that basically has, as I understand, the Anglo-Saxon identity mostly.
Yes.
But the story is that it's a resistance to the Anglo-Saxon expansion. So isn't that kind of ironic that it became part of the folklore while it's not? Huh?
No, it's not. I mentioned that. I mentioned the book I was reading about Thomas Mallory. Apparently wrote the Morte d'Arthur while sitting in prison for murder, rape, and cattle stealing. The point they made about the Tudors taking power is that the old Norman nobility were basically armed thugs. They just fought wars with each other. The War of the Roses was not a disaster. There was no widespread looting and pillaging. No cities got sacked. The economy didn't collapse. There was no starvation, and the people being killed in the war were people England was better off without. Basically, foreign nobles and foreign mercenaries. Very few English noble families date back prior to the Tudors. So effectively, if you look at an English noble family and trace their history back, they're Saxon.
interesting. So you're talking about like Richard the Lionheart and the Longshanks. They're all Tudors, right?
No, they weren't. No, they were planning to They were French.
were
They're Plantagenets.
Richard Coeur de Lion did not even speak English. He was French.
The Tudors are from Wales, actually.
Yeah, they're Welsh.
Henry Tudor. Yeah, but but the prior dynasty, they came up because they were relatives to I think they're relatives to the Plantagenets, right? So that's why they came up eventually. But Plantagenets were Normans for sure. Plantagenets was mostly Normans, yeah. But the Tudors, yeah, they're kind of you could say Welsh. I mean, it's always mixed, but they had a Welsh background.
I'd be interested in knowing the relationship between the Tudors and Arthurian legend. That one is fascinating. I'm not seeing that one.
So that's why you're saying that's why it's not ironic, because Tudors identified as Welsh. And they had not Anglo-Saxon identity. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know that. It's fun to speculate. Henry VII's first son was named Arthur.
Right.
And he was the one that died, and Henry VIII.
Sure. The one
who so England almost had
married
who
married the mother, the daughter of Isabel, right?
But we're still dealing, like you go to England, for example, we're still dealing with national myths. In Great Britain, the battles of Blenheim and Waterloo were glorious British victories. And when you read up on them carefully, we find out that the majority of the armies weren't British. They were Allied forces. And European generals from the European continent were heavily involved in the battles. At Blenheim, the Duke of Monmouth was co-commander with Prince Eugen of Savoy. And the Duke of Wellington's plan at the Battle of Waterloo was to deploy in a defensive position, wait for the Prussians under Blucher to come and rescue him. So, yeah, there's lots of wildly inaccurate history out there.
All right. Well, I just want to go over
Yeah.
the schedule. Jane, if you would be able to stop sharing, I just want to go over the schedule of upcoming, so to speak, our discussions. This was really incredible, Jane. Thank you so much.
Well, I've got new share, but I
And
don't have, oh, there it is, stop share.
Stop share, and I'll just share upcoming discussions. And then people are thanking you here. You have Bradford Williams saying, thanks for interesting session. Jeff is saying, aren't the Plantagenets the rightful ruling family that were usurped? Kind of, right? I mean, you know.
Well, listen, they were descendants of the William the Conqueror. So I don't know if it's rightful. They were they conquered the England, and yeah, they were for a period of time. If you call it rightful by conquest.
Well, I just replied to that thing.
Well,
I mean,
let's go through the schedule. One second.
Yeah, okay.
Let's go through the schedule, and I'll leave a couple of minutes for discussion. So, like I said, Saturday we have our ancient Rome, and first of all, actually, we moved one of the sections or discussions for Macedonian War, Philip V, fought with Romans. This is Macedonians that fight Romans for the Greek islands. And then we have a second one followed by Greg, would be on Saturday, Second Macedonian War. And then also in November, we have two more. Howard is going to present Third Punic War and a Third Macedonian War, and Roman expansion in Italy, third and fourth, war with Samnites would be by Paul. Then we go into our kind of random type of subject matters. We just finished with King Arthur. We're going to do Bronze Age in Asia, and it's going to be Alex C. She's going to present that. And then we're going to follow by libraries that were destroyed, Ashurbanipal and Alexandria. And then we'll have Ralph S. and Rich present Maccabees Revolt of Platony. Then we continue our Middle Eastern series, and we can say Islam 101. If anybody wants to learn about, it's interesting, to just learn on a secular level what it represents. On Tuesday, we're going to talk about Timur and Ilkhanate. Timur Lane at one point killed about 20 million people or so. We wanted to know who he was. He lived in the city of Samarkand. Ilkhanate was the Muslim kingdom in emirate in Iraq. Then we're going to talk about Islam 101. Then we're going to talk about Islamization of Turkey and early Ottomans with the Seljuks, Ionian Greeks, and Byzantium, and then Sharia law. Somebody's going to talk about what it represents. And then we're going to talk about Ottoman growing pains, and we're kind of going to finish up our Middle Eastern with women in Islam and great Ottoman conquerors. We're going to first time talk about Stoicism in our literature discussion, ancient literature, and particularly Marcus Aurelius. Is going to be me and Marika are going to talk about it. And then, if anybody's interested, we generally talk on general subjects like rivalry of Soviet Union versus USA in sports, hockey, basketball, and the history of martial arts and stuff like that. And then if anybody's in New York and interested, and to go to Ukrainian Museum and then finish it up with Marivan restaurant, which is Russian-Ukrainian restaurant, please join us. If not, I can open up for discussion if anybody has any more questions or want to say anything. And I really appreciate, I'm going to stop share. I really appreciate, everybody's joining. We had such a great discussion today. If people just, want to ask questions, whatever, I'll leave it for that. But Jane, incredible work, very detailed. Tuesday, yeah, Yes, Louisa clapping.
Yeah, I come from Italy. I enjoyed this, the Jane's work very, very much. Thank you, Jane.
Where are you?
Thank
in
you.
Italy? Where are you in Italy? In
But
Rome?
now, in this moment, I am in London because now I living in London. I come from Liguria in Italy. Do you know Liguria?
Of course, we know Liguria. We recently talked about, there was a tribe, Ligurian tribe, right?
Yeah, Liguria is the Italian Riviera, and I live in a little country just on the sea. Is Noli is an ancient sea republic. You know, like Pisa and Pisa, Livorno, Venezia, and Trieste. There
Yes.
are the 5 very good, very old sea republic. It's very little, but very, very nice. And I suggested to come in Liguria.
Awesome. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you very much for your work. Incredible work. Very, very hard, I think, because you speak for 2 hours. Thank you.
Yeah, Jane.
Sorry.
I'm amazed I can still talk.
Oh my
And
God.
you, Zahar, where are you? London, in England, or in
Oh, we're in
America?
New York, United States.
York.
No, New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Toronto, Canada.
Also,
Oh,
you,
yeah,
Jane?
Howard is from Canada. And Greg.
Oh.
Greg lives in
Oh,
Empire State Building. He actually
Oh,
lives.
No one English. No one English.
No,
you know?
no one English. Well, we have people saying Bradford is from West Virginia. Should I have a cousin in Genoa?
Oh,
Yeah, interesting.
Genoa, do you like Genoa? It's nice. It's particularly like an old Liguria is an arch on the sea, and just behind the mountain is a marble arch. No, is a rainbow. It's a rainbow. It's like a rainbow. Our symbol is the rainbow, and but you know. Here in London, I understand that in Italy we have too much art, and we don't appreciate so much what we have, because I see here in London, for example, Roman ruins are very explained everywhere you go in London. You can find the explanation of the Roman ruins, the Roman walls. In Italy, no, we have too much, and we can appreciate what we have. But thank you. And Zahar, I just see your program.
Yes.
And I want to follow you, because this even was very, very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Thank you for your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night from London. Good night.
Welcome to our group.
Here is night, but what time is it? What time is it in
New York right now is 6 o'clock, 6 p.m.
Oh, 6
Yeah,
p.m.
same as Toronto.
We are
Yeah.
10 p.m.
Or
Yeah.
in the army, you say 18 hours.
Thank you. I say goodbye. See you soon.
All right, thank you,
Bye.
Louisa. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I will say goodbye as well.
Thank you so
try to
much,
tend
Jane.
to my-
Incredible
Yeah,
work.
thank you very much. That was great.
Thank you so much. All right,
Thank
bye,
you.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice evening, and I'll see you on Tuesday.
Yeah.
All right.